Hello and welcome to our show, the Family and Life show, right here on Mwanga Radio, where we focus on family matters with the aim of developing healthier families or making healthier families. In our last episode, we introduced ourselves to the family life cycle, and we stated the 8 different stages in the family life cycle. And I promised that I'll be going through each stage by itself just to get more details on what is involved or entailed in each stage. Therefore, on our episode today, I'll be focusing on the first stage of the family life cycle, which we said the first stage is the family of origin experience. I will emphasize more on this stage because this is the first stage and it is the stage that lays a foundation for all these other stages. As I said, the person that you are today is because of the family. The way you behave, the values you hold, it's because of the family that you are raised in. Therefore, in our episode, I'll be trying to explain what are the tasks involved in this stage. As a child is in this family of origin, what are they expected to do? The second thing we'll look at for this particular first stage is the developmental stages of a human being while in this stage. I had mentioned earlier that a child develops from one stage, and we all know that they don't remain infants forever. So they continue growing one stage after another. We'll be trying to look at that. And we'll also look at some issues that may come up as this child is in this stage of life. So this topic of the family of origin, the first stage, we are going to do it in 2 parts because it's very important to get all the details. So asking ourselves, what is the family of origin experience? What are we talking about? I think we have mentioned again and again that the family of origin is the family that one was born in or the family that one was raised in, because sometimes there are circumstances that cause you be raised in a different family setup than the one you are born in. So this is the family we are talking about. What experiences did you have in that family as you're being raised? And because these form a great part of your life and they give you a foundation, they give you the values that you hold to, they give you the values that you stand for, and they shape your behavior. So what tasks does a child get involved in this first stage? Of course, the very first thing we find is that they have the task of developing the foundations of a model of a family life. As stated, when a child is born into a family, they don't know anything else about a family. They have no experience of what a family looks like. So the image they get from this family of origin is all that they know about families. I'm sure you've gone to places and you find people doing things and you feel like they are doing something wrong. It's all because you don't do it at home. That is what we are talking about. They develop a foundation of a model of a family life. So they are thinking all that is consistent in a family is what I know from my family. So that is one of the tasks. They create an image of what a family looks like. The second task is maintaining relationships with parents, siblings, and peers. While they're in this family, they have to develop relationships. We said human beings are social beings. Therefore, a child cannot grow in isolation. We have been told that sometimes experiments that have been done, if you take a child when they are born and you put them maybe among the monkeys, for example, they will behave like the monkeys. Therefore, this child who is here in a family setup has to develop relationships with the people around them. That is a task that one cannot escape. You have to know how to relate with parents, how to relate with siblings, how to relate with the outside, the extended family, uncles, aunties, cousins, and also with the peers. That is another task that one is involved in while they're in the family of origin. The other task is the aspect of completing education. Within this setup where a child is dependent on parents, they need to go through school. They need to go through, of course, the pre-primary, primary. They need to go through the secondary education as they depend on their parents, because at this time they are not expected to be earning for themselves. So these three tasks are mainly, there could be many others, small ones, but this mainly a child need to develop these three. They need to have a foundation of what a family looks like. Secondly, develop relationships with the people around them. And the other thing is that they must get into getting education and completing, for that matter. Of course, we have said that is the expectation. That is what is expected. But there are some things that may cause someone not be able to go through this successfully and not be able to, maybe complete education. It is possible. There could be circumstances of which we'll be talking about when we are talking about issues that may arise in each and every stage. In this stage, I think it would be of great importance also to understand, as I mentioned last episode, to understand what are these developmental stages. And I mentioned that we could borrow from Erik Erikson, psychosocial stages of life. There are many psychologists that have tried to explain how a child develops. But I mentioned again, they just try to explain, but they may not fully understand. Only God, the author, and the one that has the manual of life can be able to give details. So psychologists try to explain, scientists try to explain, but they can only again depend on the knowledge and the wisdom that God gives to them. So we cannot exclude God even in all this. I think the best we can say is that God is the greatest psychologist and the greatest scientist that these people also depend on. So we are looking at these different stages. In our episode today, we will cover the first two so that we can be able to build on that in the next episode. So we are thinking about this child that has been born, and according to Erik Erikson, the first psychosocial stage that this child gets into is infancy. This is an infant. The ages of 0 to 1, to 1 years. And this stage we talk about trust versus mistrust. What happens in this stage? This infant depends on the mother or the caregiver for everything. They do not even know how to speak. They do not know how to ask for anything. They do not know how to do anything. They can't even move. So they depend entirely on the caregiver. And we find that sometimes, for one reason or the other, the caregiver may delay. For example, if a child cries, because that's the only language they know, they cry when they are happy, when they are uncomfortable, they cry. When they want to express any feeling or emotion, that is the language the child speaks with. So if they are crying and they have a need, for example, maybe they are hungry, and it takes too long, the caregiver takes too long to come to respond to their cry, what happens? They lose trust in this caregiver. But if the caregiver is always on time, when they have a need, they have their need met, then they develop trust. That's why we are saying this stage talks about trust versus mistrust. So if a child learns that, there are people who care for me, there are people who are always there to meet my need, they become, comfortable and feel like the world is a good place to live in. People, I can trust on people to do and to meet my needs. So this stage is the infancy stage where a child either develops trust or mistrust. And like we said, this is a great foundation, because if a child develops trust, that will affect their relationships in their lives. That will affect everything they do in life. If they develop mistrust, it will take time for them to ever be able to trust anyone, even in their future lives. So that is stage 1. The second stage in this, as this child is in the family of origin, and this is the second one that we'll talk about, is early childhood. A child now is from maybe the first year to the third year, and this stage we call it autonomy versus shame and doubt. What happens in this stage? We have learned in the first stage, they have learned to trust or to mistrust. Here is another stage where a child develops mentally and also some motor skills. They are able to move parts of their bodies, and they would want to decide for themselves. They would want to have some freedom and to explore and to experiment, to make mistakes and learn from them. They test the limits at this stage. That's why we are calling it autonomy versus shame and doubt. Now, if they are allowed the freedom to make their little decisions, then they develop that aspect of knowing they can do things, they can make choices for themselves. On the other hand, if the parents are too strict, they don't allow them any freedom, then the child becomes, developed shame and doubt on themselves. They believe, I can't do it. I'm not wise enough. I'm not capable of making decisions for myself. For example, simple decisions like deciding which toy will I play with at this particular time. That is a decision at this stage that if a child is able to make that decision, they feel safe and they feel they are capable. So I'd want to just conclude by mentioning and recapping on what we have talked about in our episode today. We have started talking about the first stage in the family life cycle. And this stage is the family of origin, where you grow, where you are brought up. And we have talked about a child that is in this stage. We have talked of 2 stages that they go through. The first one we talked about infancy, the first year to the 0 years to 1 year, where they trust or mistrust. And the second we have talked about early childhood, where they have autonomy versus shame and doubt. And we will be picking up in our next episode to see more stages that the children develop in the family of origin. Thank you for your time.